My daughter-in-law kicked me out of my own house and brought her parents in. The next day, I sold the house. The doorbell rang as I was still taking off my shoes. 3 large suitcases stood in the middle of the living room. A pair of worn men's shoes, a knitted tote bag on the sofa, and the smell of cheap perfume lingered in the air. "They arrived early," said my daughter-in-law, Jessica, with a smile that tried too hard to be casual. My heart began to pound. I climbed the stairs slowly. The door to my bedroom was open. My bed, it wasn't there anymore. In its place, an inflatable mattress and a floral rug I had never seen before. "We thought this would be better. My parents are older. They have back problems. Your room gets better air." She said it while scrolling on her phone, as if commenting on the weather. My son, Michael, appeared in the hallway, his face tense. He glanced at me, then looked away. "It's just for a little while, Mom." He didn't ask. He informed. I went back downstairs without a word. I picked up a cup. The coffee was cold. My favorite mug, the one with my name hand-painted on it, was now filled with pencils. I sat on the very edge of the sofa. No one looked at me. They were laughing, settling in, discussing where to put her parents' new TV. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stayed silent. But in that moment, a single thought shot through my mind like a lightning bolt. They think they've written me out of the story. But they have no idea that the person who wrote this house was me. And in that silence, I had already made my decision. If this story has already gripped you in the first few seconds, get ready, because what comes next will shake you. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and join our community for stories no one else has the courage to tell. My name is Helen Morgan, 64 years old, widow, a retired nurse from a city hospital for nearly 4 decades. Most people define me by that. That strong woman who raised her son alone after her husband's accident. And yes, I am that woman, but I am also so much more. I spent most of my life not listening to myself. My routine was made of night shifts, double shifts that bled into the next day, and a back that ached before 6 in the morning. And even exhausted, I still found time to take Michael to school, cook his meals, and help with his homework. I never complained. I mean, maybe internally. But out loud, never. I always thought that was what being a mother was. To give, to nurture, to endure. Michael was a sweet boy, sensitive, smart. Whenever he saw my stained uniform or my tired eyes, he would whisper, "One day, I'm going to buy you a beautiful house, Mom." Little did he know that the beautiful house was paid for by me, with sweat, with cuts on my feet from walking barefoot in the hospital corridors, with sleepless nights while he slept soundly. When Michael married Jessica, his college girlfriend, I smiled. I had a new dress made. I bought an expensive gift. I made a point of showing that I accepted this new chapter in his life. I wanted it to work out. Even with the unease Jessica always stirred in me. She was too polite, too polished. One of those people who smiles without it ever reaching their eyes. Still, when they asked to live with me for a while, I accepted without hesitation. The house was large, Michael was tight on money, Jessica had just left her job. And I thought, this is what family is. We help each other. I took over the shopping, the cleaning, the cooking. I saw it as natural. It was the least I could do, right? But gradually something started to change. Jessica's tone of voice became more direct. Michael started staying out later. Decisions about the house began to be made without consulting me. Even the coffee started to taste of neglect. Still, I resisted. I thought it was just a phase, that soon everything would go back to its place. What I didn't know was that the place they had reserved for me was the corner you're grateful to have after giving up everything else. And it was there, between the muffled sound of suitcases being opened and the echo of my own invisibility, that I realized I was surrounded by walls I had paid for, but I felt like a trespasser, and that feeling was about to end. Because the woman they thought they could erase still had a match and a memory. I never wanted much. I didn't wish for jewelry or trips abroad or public praise. I just wanted space. And I'm not talking about square feet. I'm talking about a place in my son's eyes, A place at the table in the house I paid for. A place that wasn't conditional or temporary or dependent on someone else's goodwill. The first time I realized that place was disappearing was at a Sunday lunch. I made a beef casserole, Michael's favorite. Jessica took a bite, swallowed hard, and remarked, "We're trying to cut back on creamy sauces now. Too many calories." It wasn't the comment. It was the look that followed. One of those looks that says everything without a single word. As if, suddenly, even my cooking had become a problem. Michael said nothing. He just kept eating slowly, his eyes glued to his phone. I smiled, because I learned to smile to prevent a collapse. But that day, as I washed the dishes, the water running over my wrinkled fingers, a question pierced through me. Why do I feel like a guest in my own home? The answer came weeks later, in the form of small exclusions, decisions made without me, gifts bought for her parents, silences that fell whenever I entered a room, even the coffee. Jessica started buying a different brand, stronger. "This is the one my parents prefer," she said. And that's when I realized they were preparing the ground, testing the limits, placing new pieces on the board, and I was the one that could be removed without causing too much of a fuss. I didn't want to start a fight. I didn't want a scene. But I wanted to exist. I wanted, just once, for Michael to look at me with the eyes he used as a child. Those eyes that said, "You are my foundation, my rock." I wanted to hear a thank you, a "we miss you," or even a "this house doesn't work without you." But that never came. The opposite came. Jessica's sharp, pointed sentences came. "You've lived so much. Now it's your time to rest. My parents are more fragile. They need more comfort. You understand, don't you?" That last one cut me like a blade. Do I understand? Do I understand that you're pushing me out with pats on the shoulder and plastic smiles? I wanted to scream, but I swallowed my voice, like so many times before, until the night I overheard what I wasn't supposed to. Jessica on the phone, laughing, saying, "Soon enough, this house will be ours. She's tired. She'll eventually ask to leave herself." That's when my desire shifted. It stopped being about recognition. It became about justice. I no longer wanted flowers on Mother's Day, or empty texts in the family group chat. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they had done. I wanted them to understand the taste of contempt, that metallic taste that accompanied me every time I was ignored, silenced, replaced. And most importantly, I wanted them to know that underestimating a woman who spent her life giving is a fatal mistake. I am not a saint. I hold grudges, yes. I have wounds that still burn. But I also have clarity, and a document tucked away in a blue folder in the back of my closet, the deed to the house, entirely in my name. Why did I never mention it before? Because I thought I would never have to. I thought respect didn't need a legal reminder. That gratitude came from the heart, not from paperwork. But apparently, some people only learn when the lesson comes with a stamp and a signature. My desire now was simple, to show that the woman they treated as invisible was the owner of everything they took for granted, and that, if I wanted to, I could sell it, lock the door, and leave them on the outside, because the place I wanted was no longer beside them. It was beside myself, finally. That day, everything seemed the same. Sun streaming through the windows, the sound of the kettle on the stove, and Jessica on the sofa, feet propped up on the coffee table, laughing at something on her phone. I was coming back from the grocery store, bags full, shoulders aching. "Did you get the organic beans? My parents only eat the organic kind, not the regular ones." She didn't even look up from the screen. I shook my head and went to put the groceries away. In the hallway, I ran into Michael. He tried to smile but averted his gaze. "We need to talk later, Mom." My breath caught for a second, but I nodded, as always. When I finished putting everything away, I went to my room. There, where a part of me still remained, I opened the bottom drawer of the nightstand and pulled out a forgotten envelope. It was from my husband's old boss, Mr. Wallace. I had received it weeks ago, but hadn't read it carefully. It was handwritten, neat. I sat on the bed. My hands were shaking slightly. I unfolded the letter. I read it line by line. At the end, one sentence made me stop. Fulfilling the wish of my great friend Richard Morgan, I hereby register the transfer of 35% of the company's shares in your name, in addition to a compensation owed for unpaid services in recent years. My eyes scanned the last page. There it was, signature, stamp, amount. A sum of money I never imagined I would see in my life. I sat motionless. The world outside continued. Laughter, footsteps, voices. But inside my room, silence, and a decision beginning to form. That night, the conversation happened. At dinner, Jessica waited for Michael to finish his first plate. Then she dropped it. "Mom, we were thinking, maybe it would be good for you to visit your sister for a while. Her place by the lake." I looked at my plate. I didn't answer. Michael cleared his throat. "Just for a while, Mom. It's just that, with my in-laws here now, it's getting a bit crowded. You know?" I slowly raised my eyes. Jessica was forcing a smile. "It would be good for you too. A change of scenery. To rest. Rest. That's what they said to people they were trying to erase. You always talk about your sister's house, how it has flowers, how calm it is." She spoke as if she were selling me a cruise. I pushed my plate away. I stood up from the table. Michael fell silent. Jessica bit her lip but didn't move. I went to my room and closed the door slowly. The blue folder was still there, under the second drawer. Inside it, the deed to the house, with my name, only mine. I sat on the edge of the bed with Mr. Wallace's envelope still in my hand. On the back, a phone number was written in pen. The next morning I called. "Good morning. This is Helen Morgan. I received a document from Mr. Wallace." On the other end of the line, a polite voice. "Ah, of course, Mrs. Morgan. Mr. Wallace spoke very highly of you and your husband. We can schedule a meeting to formalize everything." Formalize everything. Simple words. But that morning, they sounded like a trumpet call. I grabbed my purse, the document, and went straight to the county clerk's office. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't ask for permission. The clerk confirmed everything with a few clicks. "Yes, Mrs. Morgan. The house is registered solely in your name. The deed was recorded 19 years ago." I signed where they told me to. I kept the copies. I walked back home with a firm step. Jessica was lying in the hammock on the porch, Michael on his computer. No one noticed my return. I put the papers away carefully. Then I went to the bookshelf, took my old notebook, and wrote 4 words. "Call realtor this week." The phone rang hours later. It was my friend Kate, the real estate agent. "Are you still thinking about selling that property where no one appreciates you?" She laughed. I laughed too. "I am. And this time, it's for real." "Are you going to tell them first?" "No, because in that moment I already knew. If they wanted me out, they would be the first to leave, not with screams, not with fights, with documents and doors closing behind them." The day began with the smell of burnt bacon. I got up later than usual. My feet ached and my head felt foggy. When I got to the kitchen, Jessica was already in an apron, with the expression of someone making a great sacrifice. "Morning," I murmured, trying to sound light. She glanced over her shoulder. "Oh, morning. I thought you were going to sleep all day." The comment was dry. It hung in the air like the smell of something spoiled. Michael was at the table, scrolling on his phone. He didn't look up. "Are you too hungry? I can make some coffee," I offered, pulling out a chair. Jessica gave a short laugh. "We already made some, and ate." "Oh, okay." I sat down anyway. I picked up a still warm cup. It was from her new collection, a colorful set that had discreetly replaced my old ones. My plates, my mugs, my table, everything felt borrowed now. "Did you see the family chat, Mom?" Michael asked, without looking at me. "Not yet. Jessica posted pictures from dinner last night. Everyone commented. That's nice." "Yeah, except a lot of people asked if you were sick, because you're not in any of them." Jessica feigned surprise. "Oh, really? Gosh, it was an accident. It's just that you were so quiet yesterday." That phrase, so quiet, it cut right through me. I wasn't quiet. I was invisible. I had made the rice, washed the dishes, set the table, and I didn't even appear in a single photo, but I swallowed it. I swallowed one more thing. "By the way," she continued, "we wanted to talk about the upstairs bedroom." "What about it?" My parents. They're having a hard time going up and down the stairs all the time, and honestly, that mattress isn't helping. I froze. You want to move them to a different room? Yes, to the one at the front. It's bigger, has more light, it's near the bathroom. Better for my dad's arthritis. But that's my room. Silence. Michael cleared his throat. Mom, we know. But it's just for a little while. You can stay downstairs, we can adapt it. That little den could be a comfortable bedroom, right? I almost laughed. Almost. But what came out was a deep breath and the taste of contempt in my mouth. Jessica rushed to explain. Look, nobody wants to kick you out of anything. We're just trying to balance the comfort for everyone, you know? You always say you want peace. Peace isn't being pushed out of my own room. Well, it's not pushing. It's redistributing. Redistributing what? Space? Affection? Importance? Helen, don't make this complicated. Oh, I'm making it complicated? Michael finally put down his phone. Mom, please, this is unnecessary. We just want to include you in a functional way. Functional. That word exploded inside me. I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a function. I was a piece. I was logistics. I stood up from the table slowly. The cup trembled in my hand. Fine. Do what you think is best. Michael smiled, relieved. Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd understand. That afternoon, I was relocated. My books, photos, quilts, all piled into makeshift boxes. My reading chair was placed in the hallway. My clothes, folded in a hurry, wrinkled. The little den that became my new room smelled of damp and had no decent windows. Jessica gave me an old lamp. It's just until they get settled. Michael passed by the hallway, glanced in. You comfortable in there, Mom? I nodded. He didn't even wait for an answer. At the end of the day, I heard his in-laws' laughter echoing from upstairs, and the sound of furniture being dragged, my furniture, my bed, my wardrobe, and me, with a thin blanket on a sofa bed that creaked with every breath. That night, Jessica passed by my new room. She was holding a tray with 2 cups of tea. I brought one up for my mom. She loves chamomile. Oh, I didn't make any for you because I thought you were already asleep. The light went out before I could answer. I lay there, with my eyes open in the dark, my back aching, my heart numb. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of them. But something went down my throat. Something heavier than tears. It wasn't just pain. It was shame. The shame of having accepted so much. For so long. The shame of having become a guest in the house I built. I closed the door carefully, as if the slightest noise could make everything crumble for good. The doorknob was loose, the baseboards chipped. That room, or rather, that makeshift storage space, was where we kept junk. Now it was my new space. I sat on the edge of the sofa bed. It sagged like a warning. My hips sank deeper than it should, as if even the upholstery was rejecting me. I took a deep breath. I tried to convince myself it was temporary, but Jessica's words echoed like a sentence, redistributing the comfort, as if I were a piece of furniture that no longer fit, as if I were a plant that's only useful if it's in the right corner. The truth is, I always fit in. I fit into the absences, into the silences of a teenage Michael, into the bills that came late, into the lack of a hug, into the scarcity of recognition. I fit in out of instinct, out of love, but also out of fear, because I was afraid of causing discomfort, of being the problem, of seeming ungrateful. And there I was, tucked away in a dark room with a thin blanket and the muffled sound of laughter from upstairs. Laughter coming from my mattress, from my pillow, from my old life. I took the photo album from the drawer where I had hidden the folder from the clerk's office. I started flipping through it. First page, Michael at 3 years old, playing with the hose in the backyard, laughing with his chubby hands raised. Second page, him sleeping in my lap at the hospital, an IV in his arm. Me in my stained white uniform, my eyes red, but still smiling for the camera. Third page, my husband, Richard, with Michael on his lap, both wearing red wool hats. 2 winters before the accident. I closed the album. I was everything to them. Mother, father, nurse, cook, therapist, bodyguard. And now? Now Jessica offered me chamomile as a favor. And my son asked if the musty storage room was comfortable. I stood up. I went to the bag where I had hidden the blue folder. That folder! It was my last bastion of dignity. I sat on the floor, crossing my legs like a lost girl. I opened it, pulled out the papers. I touched each document as one might caress a loaded weapon. The deed to the house, in my name, solely in my name. The document from Mr. Wallace, formalized at the clerk's office. The amount printed on the last page still took my breath away. I put everything away again, but now, with a different conviction. That was no longer a file, it was ammunition. In the dark, a question whispered inside me. Is this what you've become, Helen? A tolerated guest? A discreet old woman? A polite inconvenience? The answer rose like a fever. No, I was not going to die slowly in that house. I refused to be buried alive in a forgotten room. I refused to become a burden. And in that instant, my pain turned to calculation. My hurt turned into a plan. Because what they did to me was not an accident. It was a choice. They chose to erase me, to reposition me, to reduce me. But they forgot something fundamental. No one survives a life like mine without learning how to wait. I waited 40 years to breathe in peace. I can wait another 40 days to turn this game around. The next morning, I dressed slowly. Neutral clothes, hair tied back. I grabbed the folder, put it inside my zippered purse. I left without a sound. I went to the corner bakery, ordered a coffee, sat in the back where no one looks. I took out my phone. I called Kate, my realtor friend. Hi, Kate. I need to schedule an appraisal for the house. Finally decided? I've decided. Are you going to tell them? No, not yet. First, I'm going to clean up the crumbs they left on my dignity. She laughed, but there was respect in her laughter. I'll schedule a visit with a buyer who's looking for a place in the area. Bring them. The sooner, the better. I hung up. I walked back home without rushing. Jessica and her parents were watching television. Michael on the phone, laughing. No one asked where I had been. No one noticed that something was different. But I knew. I knew that the silence now was just the surface. That underneath, a hurricane was forming. And it had a name. It had a deed. It had a social security number. And above all, it had limits. Mine. If any part of this story reminds you of someone or of yourself, take a deep breath and comment below. I have felt this. Your words might touch someone else. And if it hurts, like this video, as if you're squeezing a hand in the dark, we are in this together. That Friday, the sun rose golden behind the kitchen windows. The smell of toast warmed the house, but it couldn't disguise the chill that was growing inside me. Jessica and her parents were talking loudly in the living room, arguing about putting a new hammock in their room. Michael was laughing at some joke. They looked like tourists in a comfortable hotel. Me, sitting at the table with my cup, I wasn't a guest. I was invisible, but my mind was miles away. The afternoon before, Kate had called me, her voice excited. Helen, I've found the right buyer. A young, newly married couple, looking for a big house to start their life. They're willing to pay in cash. And the viewing? I asked, feigning disinterest. Sunday at 10 in the morning, sharp. He wants to decide quickly. I smiled in silence, like someone anticipating the sound of a closing door. Now, sitting at the breakfast table, I thought about everything that was about to happen. My eyes scanned the room. The paintings I bought at a craft fair, the furniture Richard and I picked out together, the Persian rug that took me years to pay off. And there they were, sitting like they owned the place. They didn't know they were about to be asked to leave. I went slowly up to my old room. Their room now. I knocked once, out of politeness. Jessica opened the door with a rehearsed smile. Hi, Helen. Did you need something? I just wanted to get my winter clothes. I left them in the bottom drawer. She hesitated, then made space with a gesture. I walked in. My room, or what was left of it. The bedspread was different. The curtains changed. My plants were gone. In their place, porcelain trinkets and an aromatic diffuser with the scent of eucalyptus. The old wardrobe was still there. I opened the bottom drawer. My clothes were tossed in, bundled up, as if they belonged to a stranger. I took a few pieces, folded them calmly. Jessica watched me in silence. If you need help with anything, just let me know, okay? Of course. I went down the stairs carrying the weight of what was once mine. I passed through the living room without a word. They kept laughing. They mistook my resignation for exhaustion. But it was strategy. I spent Saturday organizing my documents. I checked the certificates, the records at the clerk's office, the house's history. Kate called me again. Everything is set. Sunday, 10 o'clock. He wants to see every room. He will, slowly. At night, Michael came into the kitchen where I was making tea. "Mom, are you okay? You seem distant." I looked at him. My son, the one who once promised never to leave me alone. "I'm fine, honey, just tired." He nodded, relieved by the short answer, because deep down, he feared the long conversation. Jessica mentioned making some changes down here too. Maybe a new cabinet in the living room. She wants to make everything more modern. With every word, a sentence. It was like hearing about the renovation of a life, where I wasn't part of the blueprint. "Do whatever you want, Michael. You're too generous, Mom. That's why we love you so much. That's why you take advantage of me so much," I thought. But I smiled. On Sunday morning, I woke up before everyone else. I made coffee, opened the windows. The sun flooded the rooms with a warm, almost symbolic light. At 9:55 a.m., the doorbell rang. I was the one who opened it. Kate looked impeccable. Beside her, a young couple, Sophia and Liam, holding hands, their eyes shining. "Good morning, Mrs. Morgan. May we?" "Of course. Come in." Jessica appeared at the top of the stairs, confused. "Hi? Who are you?" Kate answered naturally. "I'm Kate Miller, a realtor. We're here to see the house. Mrs. Morgan scheduled the viewing." "See the house?" Jessica laughed nervously. "There must be some mistake." Michael appeared sleepy. "Mom? What house?" Kate pulled out her folder, handed him a paper. "Deed registered in the exclusive name of Mrs. Helen Morgan. No liens, no mortgage. With a legally registered authorization to sell." Jessica turned pale. Michael turned even paler. "You're selling our house?" "No," I replied. "I'm selling my house." The silence that fell was louder than any scream. Sophia, the young prospective buyer, smiled shyly. "Can we see the bedrooms?" I nodded. As they went upstairs, Michael was still trying to process it. "Mom, what are you doing? You said the house was getting crowded, that it was just for a while. So I decided to make things easier." Jessica crossed her arms, her eyes moist. "This is a betrayal." "No, Jessica. Betrayal is taking what isn't yours and calling it redistribution." She opened her mouth, but Kate interrupted her with a professional smile. "We'll need access to all the rooms. The couple is very interested and will likely make an offer today." I stepped back slowly, sat on the sofa, picked up my cup, and for the first time in weeks, the coffee had a taste. The taste of freedom, the taste of vindication. And that was just the beginning. The viewing ended around 11. Kate and the couple left, thanking me, charmed by the space, the high ceilings, the light. Sophia even commented on how she could already see herself there, with her children running through the house. Jessica came down the stairs, her face colorless. Michael followed, dragging his feet as if he had aged a decade in half an hour. "Mom, can we talk?" he said, almost whispering. "Of course," I replied, with the calm of someone who had been waiting for this. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had served Sunday lunches, winter soups, and childhood birthdays. Now, it was the stage for a silent reckoning. Jessica remained standing, arms crossed. "You can't do this to us. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just taking care of what's mine." "But we live here," Michael exclaimed. "You do, but you never asked if you could. You just came." Silence. "You knew it was temporary." "Yes, and now time is up." He ran his hands over his face. "Where are we going to go?" "This wasn't an overnight decision, Michael. You had time. You just didn't want to see it. Or listen." Jessica intervened, annoyed. "You always seemed so calm, so passive. How could you—" "How could I change?" I completed. "It's simple. One day silence turns into a scream, but not a loud one. A scream you hear on the inside." They had no more arguments. In the days that followed, I noticed changes. Jessica started cleaning the house more often. Michael began offering me coffee. They even mentioned if I wanted to move back into the upstairs room. I refused, not out of anger, but because it no longer made sense. Kate called me 2 days later. "Helen, we have a firm offer, above the asking price. The couple love the house. They want to close as soon as possible. We'll accept it. Are you sure? Do you want to give them more time?" "They've been notified." I spent the week packing what was truly mine. The rest, I left behind. I left the kettle, the empty picture frames, the new curtains Jessica put up without asking. I left the dish towels I had embroidered myself years ago, hoping they would one day be part of a united family. None of it hurt me anymore, because now I could see. It wasn't the house. It was the absence of respect. Michael tried to convince me a third time. "Mom, what about Liam? He loves coming here. Then he can visit me at my new place, with a date and a time, like visitors do." Jessica cried one night. She locked herself in the old room, my room, and cried loud enough for me to hear. But it wasn't pain. It was fear. Fear of leaving her comfort zone, of losing the castle she had built on the rubble of my patience. When Kate returned with the sales contract, I signed it with a steady hand. Every letter, a scar closing. Every signature, a memory being freed. "Is their move being organized?" I asked. "They have 15 days, all documented. Formal notice has been sent." I nodded. Michael didn't speak to me for days. Jessica avoided my gaze, but it didn't matter. I started waking up lighter. I walked through the house as if saying goodbye to an old friend. Every tile, every step, every doorknob I once turned with love, now received my silent farewell. On the second to last day, I packed one final box. Inside, I placed Richard's photo, my wedding ring, an old shirt of Michael's from when he was a baby, and the sales contract. I sealed the box with tape and wrote on top, "Things time didn't take." On the morning of the key handover, I left early. Jessica was standing in the garden, her eyes swollen. Michael on the porch, quiet. Their moving truck hadn't arrived yet. "Are you really going through with this?" he asked. "I already have. You're going to regret this." "No, I won't. Regret is what comes from giving in too much for too long." Jessica approached. "What if we said we're sorry? I appreciate that, but forgiveness doesn't rebuild what you demolished with contempt." She tried to touch my arm. She pulled back. Michael took a step forward. "Mom, really, do you think you're right? This isn't about being right. It's about being alive, whole, and I wasn't anymore." I turned my back. As I walked to the car waiting for me with my new address in hand, I felt that, at last, the tables had completely turned. They remained on the porch, motionless, the house behind them still standing. But on the inside, it was crumbling, because for the first time, they saw that I was the owner of the foundation, and without me, nothing could stand. The morning was crisp when I woke up in the new apartment. Golden sun, the smell of fresh coffee, a silence that demanded nothing of me. I felt light, lighter than I had in months. In the mail, the document from the real estate agency was already waiting, confirmation of the registered sale. I took it out of the blue envelope, read every word, every number. I took a deep breath. I went back to the kitchen, made coffee. I messaged Kate. "I'm ready." At 9:45 a.m., she arrived with the spare key and the buyers, the young, excited couple. Sophia ran her hand over the banister. Liam looked at the high ceilings and commented on the light. They talked with enthusiasm about renovation possibilities, about decorating, as if building dreams within the walls. Jessica appeared in the living room. She was pale, her face tense. "Are you really moving?" she said, her voice choked. I smiled. "Yes, Jessica. And you're about to see what happens when someone takes a house from an owner it never belonged to." She bit her lip. Michael came forward with a confused look. I went up the stairs with the buyers behind me. Stairs. I once walked as a mother, the owner of everything. Now, I was a visitor. Sophia opened doors with shining eyes. She looked at the master bedroom. She touched the old address book I used when I worked as a nurse. That old book was still on the nightstand. Another remnant of me. We got to the living room. You saw me there, sitting with a coffee cup in my hand. "This is the final contract," Kate said, handing it to Liam. He read it in silence, then looked at me. "You signed everything?" he asked, with a mix of admiration and disbelief. I signed it. Every page, every clause, Every line. It was hard, but it was the turning point. Jessica glanced at the paper. "It was a betrayal," she shot out. "No, Jessica. Betrayal is taking what isn't yours and calling it redistribution." The words echoed in the room. Michael swallowed hard. He approached. "Mom, how did you have the courage?" I relaxed my shoulders. "You know that feeling of being buried alive in a place you built? I knew that day was over when I started thinking about myself." He looked down. His face was marked with guilt. Liam, pen in hand, sat at the table and signed the contract. Kate handed the remaining key to me. The key that, symbolically, gave me permission to be free, to leave, but with dignity. "Thank you for showing what many didn't have the courage to see," Liam said. "Now, you will live here. Make this house your home. And I hope it brings you as much joy as it brought me." Jessica gave one last look at the house. She touched the doorframe. Her fingers trembled. "We didn't know," she began, her voice failing. "Yes, you did. You just chose to pretend you didn't see it," I replied. I draped my coat over my arm. "I'll say my goodbyes now," I said. Kate walked me to the door. Liam and Sophia left with the boxes they had brought. They laughed as they discussed each room. Jessica stood inside, as if waiting for a silent goodbye. Michael was behind her. "Mom," he said quietly. "No," I replied firmly. "I am no longer the mom of this house. I am the owner." The door clicked shut. Behind it, the look of those who didn't understand, finally understood. I stood there for a moment on the sidewalk, holding the folder with the contract. The sun shone on my face. There was no sadness. There was clarity. I walked to the car with slow, steady steps. For the first time, I felt whole. The doorbell had already been replaced by silence. The house that was mine was now theirs, but the impact was only revealed in their expressions. Every look, every delayed gesture, and the humiliation that spread through the air like smoke after a fire. Jessica, standing in the living room with a glazed look and trembling lips, seemed to have been unmasked. She tried to speak, but the words failed her. Michael stood beside her. For a few seconds, I thought he might hug me, but instead, he looked away, as if trying to avoid seeing the truth reflected in my face. He didn't dare to speak. Kate and the buyers had already left. The empty boxes still occupied the entryway. The key turns silently in the final contract. I held it firmly in my hands, a symbol of my complete turnaround. In Michael's face, I recognized something that hurt like a knife: guilt. He who had so often ignored my being overlooked, who allowed the home to be eroded by a lack of intimacy. He who chose gentle neutrality over the words I needed most. "You couldn't have talked to us before?" he said, his voice choked. "I did talk. With you. With Jessica. But conversations only work when the listener has an open heart," I replied, my voice firm but calm. Jessica lowered her head. Her hands tried to close into a hug that no longer had a chance of working. "Grandpa always said the house was a symbol of unity." Her tone was almost a broken whisper. "The house belonged to the family I built," I said with contained emotion. "You enjoyed it while you were erasing me." Standing there, next to me, an old neighbor, Mrs. Gable, appeared at the door. She had heard the rumors, overheard the muffled conversation. "Helen," she began, her voice soft, "I'm so sorry. You deserve more than respect. You deserve recognition." Jessica turned to face the neighbor, a look of shame mixed with anger, a moment where everything seemed to unravel in seconds. "She always took care of all of us," Mrs. Gable continued, "and nobody saw it. Now I see it wasn't just my impression." The silence alternated between embarrassment and relief. The heavy emotional atmosphere settled in. There were no screams, just intense gazes. A definitive change had been revealed, and there was no going back. Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, the house? Is it being handed over today?" he asked cautiously. "It is," I replied. "Everything is already arranged. You can get whatever you want before the movers come." He nodded and left the house, crestfallen. I stood there, on the threshold of the door. The afternoon sun fell generously on my face. The wind moved the curtains slightly. I realized then that I had allowed my feet to be firm on that ground for the last time. That redefinition was complete. That was my victory. I went back to the new apartment, had a cold glass of water, and sat by the window, looking out at the old neighborhood. Every house a reflection of what was, of what could have been, and finally, of what would now be, a place of my own. "Are you at peace?" asked Kate, who had returned with a painkiller for a headache I had just complained about. "Not peace," I said, smiling. "Tranquility, and that is so much more." Within a week, letters arrived. First from a distant cousin. "I didn't know," the note said. "I'm so sorry." Then, messages from closer family, attempts to restore normalcy. Some made me shiver, but I didn't reply. I sent a single message to my sister, Rose. "Rose, thank you for always being with me. I'm finally free." She replied with emojis and a heart. In the days that passed, the empty house in the neighborhood changed color in my mind. It was the stage of a closed cycle. They moved into a smaller, expensive apartment, no garage, full of rules and embarrassment. It lacked the original fabric. It lacked hand-washed linens, a cup of tea at night. It lacked a heart. I received a package at my new home. It was an old vinyl record that belonged to my husband. He was an amateur musician. It had sentimental value. I didn't sell it in the move. I just took it out of the box. And that night, I listened to the music alone. The arrangement sounded reverent in the apartment. It was my moment of reconnection. The old sound breathed in my chest and reminded me of who I had always been. The lesson echoed. Change doesn't always come with a roar. It arrives with firm steps and quiet eyes. Emotional justice isn't loud. It's a silent tremor that makes everyone feel it. When I woke up in the bright bedroom of my new home, smiling, I realized their house had entered a process of absurd erosion. Grime in the cabinets, a high mortgage, arguments. I found out through the neighborhood group. I didn't make it public. I just observed. Today, when I pass by the old corner, I feel freedom. The wind, the streetlight that still flickers. Everything reminds me that I said goodbye. And I don't feel sadness. I feel clarity, because the climax wasn't just the sale. It was the reaction of those who thought they were destroying me. It was that moment when they were left without words, without a house, without an argument, and I became whole again. For a long time I thought loving meant enduring, putting up with things in silence, yielding, being invisible for the sake of peace. I was taught that a strong woman is one who swallows her tears, who holds up the world with one arm and still smiles at the end of the day. That a good mother is one who never says no, who shrinks herself to fit into the space others occupy. And I believed it. I believed it to the point of diminishing myself, of bending over backward to fit the size they expected of me, of staying silent when it hurt, of apologizing when I was the one being wounded. It took me almost 60 years to understand. That saying enough wasn't weakness. It was self-love. It wasn't easy. The house, the memories, the hugs I dreamed of, everything seemed to scream at me that I was guilty for changing, that I was betraying the role they had given me. But a role doesn't define a woman, and I refused to be an extra in my own story. When I closed that door for the last time, I took more than just boxes with me. I took dignity. I took healed silence. I took courage, because there, in that silence, in that car driving me away, I realized you only get disrespected once. After that, it's a choice to stay there, and I chose to leave. I chose the temporary discomfort of change over the bitter comfort of humiliation. Today, I sleep in peace, not because everything is perfect, but because everything is mine. My choice, my time, my company. I no longer have to walk on eggshells. I no longer have to wait to be invited to exist. I invite myself. I belong to myself. And if I can leave a single lesson for anyone who has listened to this story until the end, it's this. You might lose a lot when you stand up for yourself, but what you gain is non-negotiable. You gain yourself, and that no one can take away. For a long time, I thought I was wrong to expect recognition, that it was selfish to want a thank you, or that I'd be a bad mother for saying no, for asking for space, for demanding respect. I was taught to smile even when it hurt, to accept emotional crumbs as if they were feasts, to believe that love is measured in silence, in renunciation, in sacrifice. But that's not true. Love is not that. Love is also about boundaries. It's about choice. It's about knowing how to say, I deserve more. And it was only when I allowed myself to look in the mirror and say, in no uncertain terms, that I was exhausted from being invisible, that I truly began to exist, not as a mother, not as a grandmother, not as anyone's support system, but as a woman, whole, the owner of herself, the owner of her own house and her own story. If you've made it this far, listening to me in silence, if some part of this story has touched a dormant corner inside you, then maybe you're tired too, tired of shouldering everything, of being the strong one in the house, of being told it's not that big of a deal, of being treated like a burden when you've always been the foundation. And if that's the case, I'm telling you now, you are not alone. You are more than what others see, more than the function they gave you, more than the space they allowed you to occupy. You are whole, and you have every right to demand respect, even if it hurts, even if it's scary, even if it dismantles the entire structure. Because sometimes the truth only appears in the collapse. If this story spoke to something inside you, comment below. I choose me, always. Leave that sentence as a testament, as a banner, as the beginning of a new story that, this time, has you at the center. And share this video with someone who needs to remember that it's not too late. You can still start over. You can still rise up. Because when a woman rises up for herself, she raises the world with her.